If you didn't know, your Rawrr Mantis X needs to have an oil change. In the manual, Rawrr suggests you change it in the first 600 miles. Now, I've ridden this bike a lot more like a dirt bike than an electric bicycle, so I feel like it's necessary to change that sooner. I've only got about 120 miles on it. This is going to be a step-by-step walkthrough on changing the oil in your Rawrr Mantis X. First and foremost, let's talk about the oil used in this gearbox. The manufacturer does suggest you use a GL4 oil. That's actually pretty hard to find these days. A lot of the automatic transmissions and gearbox oils that you're going to find are actually a GL5. I talked with the manufacturer about this. They advised using the GL4 only. You can use the 5, but they said it might actually deteriorate the gearing that's inside the gearbox faster than if you use the GL4. Let's talk about the tools that you're going to need for this job. Obviously, you're going to need the oil. The smallest amount that I could find was a 1 quart. You're only going to need about 60 milliliters, and to measure that out, I got a syringe. The syringe kit that I got has a hose to it. You don't necessarily need to use the hose, but it will make it much easier. I have a bit driver with a T25 and a T30 Torx bit, a size 12 socket, and a size 14 socket. That's really it. If you've got the Rawrr toolkit, it'll have these things in there, but if you don't, those are the sizes that you'll need. While it's not necessary to remove this cover, it does make it much easier to access both the drain bolt and the filler bolt. So we're going to go ahead and pull this off first. So you've got the 3 front bolts. There's one on the top back as well. That's where you're going to need to use the bigger T30 to get into. That exposes the whole motor and the gearbox. Now with the cover off, you can see a lot easier. You've got the filler cap up here and the drain bolt right here. Again, you can access them from the bottom or from the top without removing that cover, but here it makes it nice and easy. Obviously, we want to use some type of a catch can. Ironically, I'm going to use a Frisbee because there's only a small amount of oil in there and I really want to see how much metal shavings there are in there. So with the size 12 socket, you will go to get that drain bolt. There is a cable, but it shouldn't really be in the way. So let's see how much actually comes out and how shiny it is. Barely dripping. Let me go ahead and crack the top. All right, so with the size 14 socket, I'm going to open the filler cap. Okay, there we go. With the filler cap removed, it allows more of the oil to come through. It doesn't look bad. I'm going to sit that there and let that drain for a bit. The drain plug has a magnet on it to attract any of the metal particles from inside. So that's why I wanted to change the oil before it got too late. There's some, but not a ton. This is just break-in, this is normal. Don't be scared if you pull this off and there's some metal particles on it. So on the drain bolt, you'll see that there is rubber O-ring. Make sure that that O-ring is not cracked or split or anything damaged to that because you will be reusing that. On the filler cap, there is also a rubber washer. Make sure that that is also not cracked or damaged or bent in any way. You'll be reusing that as well. One random thing to note, you do not need a lift or a stand to do this. You can do this on the side stand, just with the side stand down on the ground. But if you do that, then you have to worry a little bit more about that cable. There's enough of an opening that it shouldn't drip on too much of the frame, but you might have to move that cable out of the way while you're draining it. Now, I didn't mention this in the tools that are required because although it's not required, it really should be a torque wrench to adjust the torque on the drain bolt. I reached out to Rawrr and said, I can't find the tech specs anywhere. Can you tell me what the torque specs are for the filler and for the drain bolt? They replied back fairly quickly and said it is 16 foot-pounds of torque, which is roughly 22 Newton meters. That was a lot less force than what they were in there with initially. But we're good. I want to look at the oil itself that drained out to see how glittery it is. There are some metal particulates in there, but nothing terrible. Nothing that you can really probably even see on the camera. So generally, I think that's pretty good. But I will say, this is not a lot of oil. It should be 60 milliliters, which I've been seeing some reports of people saying that there's not enough oil from the factory when they get these bikes. So that made me even more confident that I wanted to change the oil before that 600-mile break-in point. Make sure your oil is fresh, make sure you have the right amount, and that's why I got this syringe. As I mentioned in the beginning, you want to look for an oil that has an API GL4. GL5 is the most common these days, but you can still find the GL4, again, linked below in the description. This is a 75 to 90 weight. What the manufacturer suggests is an 80 to a 90 weight. So this is a little bit lighter of a weight than what they're suggesting, but that should be okay. Being as the filler is kind of set back and underneath the frame, it's easier to use the syringe to fill, and I got the hose so that I could actually just drop the hose inside like that, get it as deep as I can within the gears, and then push the oil through that way. Let's see if this works. So that was taking forever. I'm going to just pour it in to the 60 milliliter mark. So this is kind of messy. I don't know that I love this method, but this is where it's beneficial. Tube into the motor. So in my first attempt of doing this, I blew off the nozzle of the tube. Now I'm holding it in place. I got to push really slowly. That way it settles all the oil in the motor. I did have it kind of explode out the top too, so take your time, be patient with it. Try your best not to make a mess. Oh, already coming up the top. Dang. I don't know if you can see it. There's not a whole lot of light back there, but I'm watching the filler. And when I see it start to bubble over, I stop. All right, I'm going to give that a little bit of time, let that settle. And I'll go back to filling some more. Let's try it without the hose and see how that goes. Maybe I can actually fill it faster that way. Fill it till I see it. Hopefully let it settle. You can see it like burbling in there. I do feel like it is easier without the tube, just the syringe, because you can see, I hit a pocket of air in the syringe itself. Man, I feel like there's got to be a better way. I'm sure all the Rawrr guys are watching this going, oh, come on. That's no way better than a belt. I just feel like that hole's too small, or there needs to be a vent somewhere to allow it to breathe and fill up easier. This is a request of Rawrr. If you guys are watching, and I hope you are, on the full-size Mantis, you've got that sight glass, you've got the vent right there. Why is it not on the X? Give us some type of a vent either on the side or on the top, or a sight glass, something to help us do a better oil change, because this is a bit tedious. Hopefully this video is helping people, but to me, as somebody changing the oil for the first time, and I've changed oil on lots of motorcycles, this is kind of a bad design. While I'm waiting for that oil to settle and I can finish topping it off, I want to add this too. I've only got 120 miles on this bike. I'm at a point where I need to replace this chain. So far, that's been the biggest wear item. I'm also looking to do a replacement of the bars because those bars they feel a bit too much like a mountain bike to me. I want something that has a bit more sweep. So I'm looking at the Warp 9 bars. If anybody has any suggestions for other bars, let me know. I've had some questions about the suspension because that was one of my gripes when I first put this bike together, was how pogo-y it was. I did increase the compression to about 160 psi using the right torque tube, and then I also added this little zip tie here to see how much I'm bottoming out. It has come to a point where I'm not using full travel, which is awesome. I like that. The rear suspension's been okay for me. I did set the preload using my slacker scale, which measures the distance between the top of the fender and the axle nut there when you sit on it. So that's a really cool tool. I'm getting to a point where I'm going to consider a different set of tires for this. I want something that's more off-road oriented. These knobs are just a bit too close together for my liking with the riding conditions that I do. I'm in Southeast Texas. We've got a lot of soft tracks. This tends to just spin quite a bit. Again, I said tracks. Yes, I take this to motocross tracks. I don't do street wheelies. I don't ride around neighborhoods. This is an off-road bike for me. As far as wearing items so far, I've got the foot pegs to a point where they're getting not so sharp. I might want to take a file to these knobs, get them a bit sharper for my foot pegs. I am wearing through the cases itself. This is just a cover, but then the edge of the motor has boot marks on it too. Even my knees are starting to rub down the frame. But generally speaking, this is holding up pretty well. I've crashed this bike a couple times, nothing bent, nothing broken, nothing really damaged other than my ego. A truly random thing to note, when the chain stretches out, it gets dangerously close to the spring of the kickstand, the side stand there. When you're backing the bike up and you're rolling in reverse, this will actually hit that and you'll hear it clicking. I haven't had any issues when I'm riding on the track, but that's something I'm definitely keeping an eye on and why I'm replacing the chain after 120 miles. All right, let's get back to the slowly but surely. Still got 20 milliliters left to put in this thing. Man, this is a tedious process. All right, nobody wants to watch this whole thing. 60 milliliters goes in. Be patient, be slow, take your time, don't make a mess. Last fill up, last top off, and then we're going to call it done. All right. All 60 milliliters now in. Let's get the filler cap back on, make sure it's clean. Make sure you've cleaned the area as well. Just going to finger tight it for now. This is also supposed to be that 16 foot-pounds, 22 Newton meters. I'm just going to snug it up with my socket. All right, we are good. So Rawrr states that after the first initial brake and oil change, you should be good for 5,000 kilometers, which is about 3,100 miles. I do not like those numbers. I'm going to change this again probably in the next 500 miles just because I want to make sure that those gears are kept safe. And with the amount of oil that I saw, or the amount of metal that I saw in the first change, I want to make sure it's good after that. The oil change kit that I've got linked below was very inexpensive. I'd rather just take the time to do that every 500 miles and not have to worry about it potentially imploding inside the gearbox. I'd rather be safe than sorry. I learned some lessons in this. I'm not going to use that tube method again. I'm just going to use the syringe. I do recommend taking off that case cover just so you can get easier access to it and you can see what you're doing when you're filling, because there is no sight glass. And again, Rawrr, I hope you're watching this. Please, in future models, make it easier to do the oil change. Give us some type of event or a sight glass to know what we're doing with that. That would be hugely helpful. Hopefully this was helpful to you as a Rawrr owner. If you like this kind of stuff, like the video, share the video, comment below. Let me know what other kind of content you want to see of this bike because I plan to ride it a lot more. Stay safe out there, have fun, and I'll see you in the next one.